Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm doing my video a little bit early this week because tomorrow looks pretty busy for me. And we have three major events this coming week. So I want to cover them all. A few, three, they're not connected, but they're all happening in roughly the same area of the sky. So I think it's an important uh, point in time. Uh, so, uh, First of all, I'm a Vedic astrologer of roughly 30 years' experience. I've been the president of the Council of Vedic Astrology, and I also teach Vedic astrology and also do readings. So if you want to contact me for instruction or for readings, text me or call me at 508 525 0001. I'll be happy to help you in whatever way I can. If you want to ask me questions or also come on the show with me, that'd be great. If you're an astrologer in particular. And also, I was just trying to get my voice a little bit more resonant. And also, if you can let me know which topics you'd like me to cover, I'll be happy to do that. I did get some suggestions last week, and I will be covering those. But I do want to get your feedback. I do want to engage in conversations with you. So please do contact me. Do leave comments. Do like, subscribe, and share if you feel so inclined. We're up to nearly 800 subscribers now, which again isn't a lot, but it's growing slowly but surely, and that's a good sign for me. So let me just go ahead to the charts in question, and the first chart I'll pull up. So we've already spoken about the eclipse in previous broadcasts, but there's a lot of activity, a lot of surprising activity happening right now. And I'm trying to get the rasp out of my voice. Happening right now. And there have been a series of big disasters starting on March 25th, and also surprises and upsets happening politically, and also, I would say, certain Earth catastrophes, although they haven't been huge scale, but they've been a little bit concerning. So essentially, we're having earthquakes in the United States, in parts of the United States that don't often see earthquakes. I'm not referring to the West Coast earthquake, but essentially we just had an earthquake today in New Jersey, which is very unusual. It's not entirely unprecedented. Just anecdotally, where I live next to Martha's Vineyard is close to a fault line, and sometimes we get small air tremors here. But nothing substantial. But I find it interesting that we're getting earthquakes coincident with let me just see if I can describe it properly. With the appearance of a comet that occurs once every 71 years. So comets in Vedic astrology they're complicated fixtures. So depending on the nature of the comet, whether or not the tail is facing away or towards the Earth, there are certain rules for interpreting comets in the Brihat Jataka, which is a very important astrological text from India. And I haven't looked up those rules in connection with this comet, but comets usually are disruptive elements. They're usually not. They're usually not good omens, to be quite honest. So, as a matter of fact, they're called Ketus in Vedic astrology, and there are numerous types of Ketus. Typically, they do indicate a change to the existing order. They note changes and disruptions to existing practices. I don't necessarily think this is an evil comet, but I do find it fascinating. It's coming right on the edge of an eclipse, and also when Saturn and Mars are almost exactly conjunct. So we're going to look at those charts. We're going to look at the Saturn-Mars chart for next week. We're not going to look at the eclipse chart again because essentially I think I've kind of beaten to death what the eclipse chart can show. But let's look at the chart for next week, and we'll go from there. Okay? So let me just pull that screen up. I'm going to stop the share because it doesn't seem to be showing. It looks like it's showing right now, but third time for luck. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to see if I can put a timer on it. Captions. And I'm also going to see if I can get the timer to show, which I couldn't do last week, and which I'd like to share with you folks. So, no, it's still not showing it, so I'm going to be so let me stop the share and start up again. Just do one more thing. No, I don't want to. That's what. Stop worship again. Right. So, let me just see if we can go back to the share screen again. All right. So this is actually showing the actual timer. Excuse me. And basically, this is a now chart for when I'm actually doing this broadcast. So it's happening at around 3:11 in the afternoon, and the time that was brought up when I originally pulled it up was 259. So we have Leo rising. This does actually, it's interesting that it would reflect the same. I'm just going to make sure the share screen is on again. My apologies. All right, so the share screen is on. So actually, one of the things that I mentioned going into this particular broadcast was that the sun's that there could be loss of leaders, or leaders could be overthrown or leave office, and this certainly does indicate potential danger. It can also indicate leaders working behind the scenes, being sneaky, being duplicitous. The Sun Rahu Venus conjunction over here. And also Jupiter's in the ninth house, aspected by Saturn. So, and Mercury's also in the ninth house. It just went retrograde earlier this week, and it's going to head back into Pisces, which is another planetary phenomenon. Within about 2 days, it'll be back in Pisces again. So I think one of the things we have to realize when we see combinations like this is we have a close Saturn-Mars conjunction along with the moon right now. And this conjunction, interestingly enough, has seemed to sap a lot of the energy out of people, or they get very angry over small things. Because Mars is essentially, and you're going to see that anger increasing over the next week, mainly because Mars will be by April 10th, Mars will be in planetary war. By April 9th, actually, Mars will be in planetary war with Saturn, and Saturn will be, and the slowness of Saturn will tend to resist that. After that, after the 10th, Saturn will be winning planetary war because Mars will be running away from it. So basically, and that's the way I've always interpreted planetary war. There are a variety of different ways to interpret it. There are at least 3 different methodologies I've seen. So essentially, from this combination right here, so planetary war becomes significant because a lot of the houses that the planet that gets defeated in planetary war get damaged by planetary war. So it's essentially, and I always held the position that no planet really benefits from planetary war. It's really, it comes out the victory, yeah, but essentially, in any war, troops on both sides are damaged, right? So, and the people on both sides are damaged. So this is not necessarily the greatest phenomenon to have happening in a chart. I think one of the things that we see right here is right now you have, so we're not really at the most intense part right now. And I think really one of the things that also happens is Ketu in Virgo tends to encourage earthquakes. Venus with Rahu tends to encourage too much water. Government reactions will be slow. Saturn and Mars will essentially, Mars rules police, so, and emergency services. So essentially response time will be slow. And also it will cause some damage to real estate. So Saturn and Mars in this kind of a combination will cause some damage, or some, so it's sort of some damage to real estate or property. So it's sort of like a compounding effect. So you have water damage, you have wind damage from Saturn, you have water damage from the sun, and wind damage from Rahu, and you have earth damage from Ketu. And Mercury going back into the sun actually indicates bad communications about this particular pattern. Now we can go back to the eclipse point again, just for a second, and that'll happen on April 8th. But it's been my experience that there's an eclipse window between eclipse points. So we have the lunar eclipse March 25th, and April 8th we'll have the solar eclipse. And I think one of the things that happens when we see these phenomena is that there's something very, very strange or very unearthly about eclipses. They tend to disrupt the natural order of things. It's coming up right across the United States, mid-belt, really roughly from Texas, Mexico to Texas, all the way up through basically through Maine and into the mid-Atlantic states. And it goes out to the Pacific, but it doesn't touch any islands of the Pacific. It does touch the Azores. Okay, so I think one of the things, or there's an influence on the Azores. So I think one of the things you'll see is it'll touch Europe indirectly. It won't necessarily hit all of Europe. And I'm going to go to the map earlier than I usually do. And that's mainly to see where we're having problems right now. I'm going to zoom out. And let's see now. Close this down. And call it up again. And that might do it probably. Yes, there it goes. Okay. So we have no interaction of Mars and Saturn on the west coast of the United States. Venus, however, does indicate some potential for flooding, some potential for earthquakes in California over the next week, and also in Seattle and Washington, and also in Canada. There's a Rahu-Sun conjunction in New Mexico all the way up to Montana, and this will cause disruption in those states, maybe some kind of scandal connected with government, and maybe even some recalls of people. Communications will be confused in eastern Texas. And there's this big Jupiter line running right down through close to New Jersey. So one of the things that I had mentioned about the comet is the comet's coming very close to Jupiter. I don't normally use Uranus in astrological predictions because I think they're kind of unnecessary. But I think in this particular case, Jupiter's affecting the sign ruled by Rahu, or Jupiter's ruling a sign in which Rahu sits, and that'll cause some disruption in New Jersey, also in northern South America, also in Haiti and Cuba, and also all the way down into Peru. Peru's been having some strange luck lately in terms of its elections, and there's been a lot of chaos in Peru lately. Chile is also somewhat affected. And if we go up through, basically, there's governmental scandal in Ireland and in Scotland right now, a little bit in Portugal. There's a Venus line running down close to the Azores, close to Iceland, which has experienced a series of volcanoes over the past few months, excuse me. And the other factor we're looking at is we have a Rahu, a Mercury line running up through Germany and up through Norway and Finland. I'm sorry, not Norway, Sweden and Finland, and also into Denmark. So there have been some governmental scandals, from what I understand, in Denmark lately. So that's definitely affecting them. The other Jupiter line is running through Turkey, and so there was an upset, or not an upset. There was a defeat of the ruling party's candidate. But again, this was an incumbency, so I think they're overplaying that just maybe a little bit, not because it's a bad thing, but because essentially they have the ruling party was expected to win. I'm not sure about that. I kind of think that's being overplayed a little bit, because essentially the person who won in Istanbul was the incumbent. But it was considered a blow to Prime Minister Erdogan. Also, there's a Jupiter line running up through Ukraine, Moon, Mars, Saturn line. This Mars, Saturn line, we're going to go to April 10th in a few seconds. This indicates some real problems for Ukraine, I think. A lot of violence. I don't see a lot of successful fight. Maybe an initial fighting back, and then later on in the week, just a collapse almost. And let's see now, Venus lines with some flooding in Iran. Let's see now, and Rahu and Sun governmental scandals in India, going up to Pakistan and Afghanistan. And a Mercury line, a lot of confused communications coming out of eastern India. The other line we're looking at is a Jupiter line running through basically Southeast Asia, China, and also Indonesia. So some upsets or some delays in production. And there's a Moon Mars line in Japan. So there have been tsunami warnings in Japan, and Moon here tends to encourage the influx of the water. And let's see now, down in Australia, maybe some additional water damage down here, although Australia is mostly desert, or the center of Australia is mostly desert. And over here there's a Venus line running over here through Australia, and to these islands right here. I can't remember the name of the islands. And finally, there's a Rahu line running out. So again, some government scandal in New Zealand. Now I'm going to go ahead to April 10th, mainly because this will be when the Mars and Saturn lines are right on top of each other. Hope it's saved. April 10th. There we go. Great. All right, so over here you can see Mercury is debilitated and is back in the same sign with Venus. This is a Nietzsche Bangaraj Yoga, or essentially it's a cancellation of Mercury's debilitation by an exalted planet, but Mercury is still debilitated. It'll still show some effects. This damages Virgo. This damages Gemini to a certain extent. And if we're looking at communications issues, there'll be a real temptation to twist the news over the next few weeks. Just letting you know in advance. Now, this one of the reasons I picked this particular date and this particular time is because this is when Mars and Saturn are just really right on top of each other. So whenever that happens, I've noticed Mars and Saturn combinations tend to be what I would call perfectionist combinations. And so essentially, you may see another attempt to recall, this is the Speaker of the House, an attempt to recall governments gaining a lot of steam, and also an adherence to doctrinal purity, which I've seen happening quite a bit over the past few years. There's almost an unwillingness or a lack of interest in compromise. I think that that's going to be made worse by this particular conjunction, and there may even be some violence connected with it. I hope I'm wrong about that. Also, this is a time when people traveling should be really, really careful. Like the entire period between April 8th and April 12th, just be really, really careful traveling, because people are going to be very angry. They're going to be very confused. They're going to be very aggressive. Okay? So this particular time is one of the most dangerous times of the year. By the way, there's another comet coming in September and October. So just so you know, just so you won't feel like this is the only time you're going to have to worry about a comet. But basically, and I know I'm smiling, but that's not gleeful. It's just like, oh Jesus, we're going to have another one of these things. So basically, the Mercury Venus Rahu conjunction is not really a bad luck combination, but again, you can't expect people to be absolutely truthful with you during this particular conjunction. There'll be hidden things which will come up, a lot of communications that have been hidden. I think you're going to see a lot of scandal connected with leaders in a variety of countries, not just the United States. This conjunction and somebody in Baba had actually said this doesn't look like a good combination for President Biden, because it sits in the fourth house. It sits in his fifth house, which is the house of politics, and it sits in Donald Trump's eighth house, which is not a good combination either, but it's a little bit more. I'm just trying to think of the right term to use. It's a little bit more beneficial for him than fifth house, because fifth house is the house of luck. And neither Mercury nor Venus are good planets for Scorpio rising. Sun, as a matter of fact, really isn't spectacularly good, although it's better than other planets are. Also, like I said, Mercury, I'm going to say this as a general rule. Don't believe anything you read, or check out everything you read over the next couple of months. Check out everything you see over the next couple of months, because essentially it's going to be a lie fest. Okay, so, and that's true of anybody. You'll see a lot of people trying to scramble to cover themselves. And I think you're going to see a lot of people not necessarily taken down, but embarrassed or humiliated at a minimum. You may even see major shifts in political dominance. Again, you'll see that at 2 points this year, roughly between now and May, and also between roughly mid-September and mid-October. I think the other thing is the Saturn-Jupiter aspect is still active until the end of April. So Jupiter can't really help out the chart. It can't pull out this claim to traditional values. And also, this causes pressure on oil supplies. The Mars-Saturn conjunction, in particular, puts pressure on oil supplies. So we've seen the price of gasoline go up over the past couple of months. We're going to see it go up again. I would say even more so after that, because of Saturn influencing Mars. And also, Venus will be changing signs, so prices will probably go up, I would say, again in about 3 weeks. Okay, so there's all this kind of inflationary pressure, all this, even though Jupiter's changing signs, Venus is also an economic indicator planet. And I'm not trying to make people pessimistic. That's far from my belief. I think, well, that's far from my desire. I think one of the things that'll be nice about this combination is you'll see a lot of truth come out and a lot of people scrambling to try to change that truth into something else. And that'll last for about 3 weeks and then it'll kind of collapse on itself. So I'm thinking it'll be interesting to see what's happening over the next few months, just in terms of court cases and government investigations. And like I said, not just in the United States, although it does seem like the United States is hit more heavily by this, but also in countries like China that have prominent Virgos in their chart, and also in large parts of the European Union, which also have a lot of planets and a lot of rising signs in these angles. So just watch out for, now again, the downsides of this is, even though it'll be good to know the truth, it'll tend to destabilize countries to a very large extent. It'll make it easier for people to get violent or angry. And I am expecting to see a lot of violence this summer. I hope I'm wrong. I really, really, really hope I'm wrong. And let me just go over here. So let's go over to the actual charts. Going to a now chart. And we'll go to, all right, so the day that, like I said, the comet joins with Jupiter and Uranus, although I don't use Uranus, is the 12th. It'll seem much brighter in the sky. It's essentially what they call a volcanic comet, which essentially is, it seems to explode in the sky. And so this will be interesting to watch. So let's talk about Aries, and we'll go through the signs, and I'll try to wrap up by around 4 o'clock my time. Okay, so we have a retrograde Mercury and Jupiter in the first house for Aries. Mars is in the 11th house. That's good for financial gains. It's also good for property gains, but it'll require a great deal of work. The retrograde Mercury in the first house is really not a bad combination, but it does mean that desires which you had let go of will start to come up again. And, and some of the clarity of thought you acquired over the past few weeks will sort of go south for a little while. So you'll be wanting more things than you can afford, basically. That's what it means. And you'll also be encountering enemies you thought you had conquered. Again, so that's an unfortunate thing. And also financial losses will be will probably occur. Now, again, if you're disciplined, you're not going to have those kinds of problems. But just letting you know, it's one of those things which is a potential danger. Relationship partners will be a little bit greedy or consumptive. Essentially when I say consumptive, they'll be wanting to buy a lot of things. And career life actually looks good for this sign over the next few weeks. For Taurus, let's go to Taurus. Taurus is doing okay financially. It looks like it'll actually have an increase in financial growth over the next few weeks. But again, there'll be this large temptation to spend whatever it earns. So that's not necessarily the worst thing that can happen. But again, I'm just trying to encourage people to hold on to their money a little bit more tightly. And so again, there'll be this tendency to overexpend or over purchase. For K2 in this particular chart, children will seem a little bit difficult to deal with, a little bit argumentative. Let's see now. And career-wise, Taurus looks like it's doing good financially from every other aspect. But again, there's this problem with relationship partners seeming a little bit depressed or a little bit isolated and also moody. For Gemini, Gemini is June 15th to July 15th. Gemini has a Mercury which will become debilitated over the next couple of days. So essentially what that means in plain English is you'll be forcing yourself to do too much at once. That's basically the big problem here. The other thing you want to look out for is K2's in the fourth house. There'll be a lot more arguments than normal at home. Career life looks good for Gemini. There'll be a lot of recognition, a lot of gain. But again, you'll feel like you're running in circles in order to keep what you've earned. Saturn, Mars, Moon in the ninth house. There'll be problems with higher ups or maybe even arguments with higher ups or teachers or anger with them. I want to try to avoid that. And Jupiter's in the 11th house, so that looks good for financial growth and financial gains. But again, there's this tendency to really try to stretch yourself too thin, which could be detrimental to this sign's health. For Cancer, Cancer has the moon in the 8th house along with Saturn and Mars. So this sign will feel like it's sort of underwater. It's sort of not being paid attention to this week. K2's in the 3rd house. Will have a lot of courage, a lot of ambition, which is a good thing. But I think one of the things you have to watch out for is that whenever you have combinations like this, that there's this temptation to strike out and lash back, especially in relationships. Venus is in the 9th house. That's a good placement. Venus with Mercury is not that great for keeping hold of money, and there'll be a lot of expenditures made up for financial matters. And finally, as we go into the Mercury-Jupiter conjunction in the 10th house, career life should expand. For Leo, Leo has Moon, Mars, and Saturn in the 7th house. So again, relationship partners will seem a little bit difficult, a little bit tough to deal with. And Rahu and Venus and Sun will be in the 8th house. There'll be a certain lack of confidence or dissatisfaction for this sign. So that combination will be in this sign's 8th house. For the moon, my apologies. For the moon, the moon's lord is in the 8th and the sun's lord is in the 8th. So Leo's lord is in the 8th house. So that will give a little bit of delusion or a little bit of greed to the sign. K2's in the 2nd house, a little bit tough to hold on to money. And Mercury, though, is in the 9th house along with Jupiter. That's a good combination for financial growth. But Mercury will go back into this particular sign. So there will be more delays of items like real estate and financial matters. For Virgo, Virgo has K2 in the 1st house, Sun, Venus, and Rahu in the 7th house. So there'll be this temptation to go after like really good looking people in relationship, people who you really aren't compatible with, but who look good. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Also, one of the bright prospects about this combination is people will let their thoughts, will tell you their thoughts about you in a way you wouldn't expect. So you may actually get positive relationship news, but I wouldn't jump into anything, at least for the next year or so, just because of that Rahu in the 7th house. It does create an intense attraction to other people. That's one thing that it does, but it's a little bit difficult. It's difficult to make the relationship last or be really fruitful. For you have Saturn, Mars, and Moon in the 6th house. So this sign will feel the desire to improve itself physically, and also Mercury and Jupiter, unexpected financial gains from unexpected sources. So actually not bad for Virgo. But again, you do have this hemming in of the 7th house. So there'll be some relationship potential, but you won't be able to pursue it, to be honest with you. For Libra, Libra has Jupiter and Mercury in the 7th house. So again, that gives attraction to talkative or optimistic partners, but there will be delays or obstructions because of Saturn. Yeah, so you won't be able to move forward with those things. This sign will mostly be focused on work, fame, and recognition because of the Venus-Sun Rahu conjunction in the 6th house. It'll be putting a lot of its effort into things connected with that. Saturn, Moon, and Mars in the 2nd house, actually not bad for money. But again, it'll slow down and the money will come in more slowly over the next month or so than usual. But Saturn aspecting Jupiter, actually it forms a kind of a special Raj Yoga for this planet or for this sign. And Saturn aspecting Mercury is another good combination. So actually you should see some increased financial luck over the next couple of weeks, but with a lot of effort. For Scorpio, Scorpio has Venus, Rahu, and Sun in the 5th house, and Mars, Saturn, and Moon in the 4th house. So there will be some kind of problems with a relationship partner, maybe a relationship partner being a bit abusive or a bit manipulative. But it is a relatively, not entirely a lucky combination, but a relatively lucky combination. But this sign will encounter a lot of enemies over the next, even in the home, over the next couple of months. And this Venus Sun Rahu conjunction in the fifth house. Again, it is kind of a shameful combination. So it gives detrimental news to children. Children are involved in scandals or involved in financial distress. Jupiter and Mercury are in the sixth house, gives trouble with courts or with enemies. So again, it is a good time for this sign to be careful, especially traveling. As Saturn Mars conjunctions right in the fourth house of vehicles. For Sagittarius, Sagittarius has Jupiter in the fifth house along with Mercury. Not a bad combination, but the Mercury station, Mercury being placed, in the fifth house will only be short-lived and will go to the fourth house. So there'll be problems with vehicles, problems with finances, problems with home repairs, those kinds of things. And also, in terms of Rahu being there, some scandal connected with status or position. And when I say scandal, it doesn't necessarily mean the person's going to be embarrassed. At least the person will be embarrassed. That's so. If your chart is going through a good major planetary period, you don't have anything to worry about. It'll just be a little bit embarrassing. If it's going through a difficult major planetary period, then you'll experience some major downfalls. But I think with this particular combination, this sign will also have a lot of courage, and it will also have, but again, politically, watch out who your friends are, watch out who your enemies are. Don't trust anybody. K2's in the 10th house. Again, there is a certain amount of embarrassment or fall of status in K2's in the 10th house. So again, it's mixed for Sagittarius, not entirely bad, but not entirely good either, to be honest with you. So from the home front and from family matters, a little bit difficult. Career-wise, not recognition, but no major downfall. For Capricorn, Capricorn has Saturn in the second house along with Mars, so that's a good placement for money, good placement for financial success. And this combination, this Sun Rahu Venus combination in the third house is good for financial growth, good for ambition. Fourth house has Mercury and Jupiter in it. So again, not the best placement, but still not really, really bad. Mercury will be with Venus, which are two fortunate planets for Capricorn. So you'll see some financial luck for this sign, even when Mercury goes into Pisces. Yeah, let's see now. Aquarius, K2 in Capricorn, again, some problems with real estate or damage to property. Aquarius has Saturn, Mars, and Moon in it. Aquarius has been a busy little sign over the past few months, and that's what caused a lot of the air catastrophes we've experienced. But I'm hoping that when Mars starts moving away from Saturn, there'll be less damage. There'll be more caution shown in air travel. And so overall, the next week will be kind of tough in terms of air travel, but after that, we should see some abatement of these kinds of tragedies or problems we have in terms of travel. And also, and I forgot, there was a piece of the West Coast to California's highway that got knocked off just outside of San Francisco. I almost forgot about that. And so that's in keeping with that line going through California that we looked at earlier. We have Venus, Mars, and Rahu in the second house. I'm sorry, Venus, Sun, and Rahu in the second house. So this should give gain through relationship partner, but the gain won't feel satisfactory. And Jupiter and Mercury in the third house. Sun will probably be overly polite. Finally, let's go on to Pisces. Pisces has an exalted Venus in the first house, which is always good for success for this sign. Sun is Lord of the fifth house, so it's essentially a lucky placement for this sign. This forms a kind of a Raj Yoga, the Sun Rahu conjunction for Pisces rising sign and for Pisces Sun. So actually, it should be a relatively lucky week and month for Pisces. Jupiter's in the second house, good for money, good for financial growth. Ketu's in the seventh house, relationships, life will still seem difficult. Mars, Saturn, and Moon in the 12th house have to be watching for overspending money. So let's go up to the layout example. I want to go to April 12th. And look at, or April 10th, excuse me. 10th, 2024. And I don't think I need to draw up the map for April 12th in order to discuss the comet, because the comet will be in the same, it'll be out of range of the moon, because the moon will move over to Taurus, so that'll be good. But the comet will appear close to Jupiter. And this is where we have the Mars-Saturn line appearing. So let's look at this map one more time. So again, we have, so the center of activity has shifted over to Hawaii. This is more in danger of flooding for Hawaii. Some danger of earthquakes in the Aleutians, but not really major. But definitely some indications of accidents in the Pacific Ocean. There's a Sun-Mercury line running in the Pacific, so it's really not interacting with anything, but it could give some bad news to the government of Alaska and also of Western Canada. There's a Moon-Jupiter line going right through all the way from Montana all the way down to Mexico. So you'll see more focus on law enforcement around that part of the country and that part of the world. And there's a Mars line running through Michigan all the way down to Georgia. Now, this is interesting because these are essentially what are the battleground states in the United States election. This belt or parts of this belt contain a lot of those states. And I think one of the things that I'd like to keep you in mind is, and Florida is also becoming a battleground state. And this can indicate some kind of bad event happening in this general part of the world, or it can also indicate some fighting or some disruption, even down into Panama, definitely into Peru, and definitely into Chile, down into the south. And there's a Venus line running through Brazil and through Uruguay and Paraguay, which to me indicates heavy rains, possible landslides or mudslides. Sun and Rahu are in conjunction in Brazil. Probably some governmental scandals there. There's a Jupiter moon line happening in France and going up through. So there'll be some change of laws based upon the population's wishes in Spain, France, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. And there's also, I have to go through this, there's also a Mars-Saturn line, so there could even be some violence in Central Europe, down through Italy and to Switzerland and Germany, and definitely into places like Libya and down into Ghana. and West Africa in general. The other parts is, so again, this isn't surprising because France is having particular problems with this part of the world, but I think it'll explode around that time. Venus is running through Egypt, so again, some more flooding. Rahu will give some frustration in coming to resolution about international conflicts in Israel and Gaza. And there will be some governmental scandals in, I think, in Saudi Arabia and down through Madagascar. The other part of the world, so essentially the situation in the Ukraine hasn't changed all that much. And there's a Jupiter-Moon conjunction in India, which again indicates heavy rains. But the part I'm more worried about is the Mars-Saturn conjunction over here in going through China, going through Vietnam, going through Cambodia and Laos, and down into Indonesia, touching on Indonesia, and governmental scandals occurring in Australia, and maybe even tsunami activity in Japan and down to New Zealand. So that's it for this week. I have to run. As always, it's been an enormous pleasure for me to be here. I hope I made the time limit this week. And thank you very much for watching. I love you all. Just be careful next week. Don't be paranoid. Don't be a hermit, but just be careful around August 8th, August 10th, or August 12th. Okay? And again, that can open new opportunities for you too. So keep in mind, it's not only challenges, but there are also opportunities to come out of these events. So this could be your big break. Okay? All right. See you all soon, and God bless you all. Bye, everyone.